The collapse of Porsche's talks with Red Bull is a major blow for the manufacturer, but could mark good news for another. There are hopes that Porsche's proposed entry can be salvaged for 2026, but it's a lot easier said than done. The biggest complication is on the engine side, and Porsche is very short on time to find a solution. In the meantime, the end of its own negotiations with Red Bull opens the door for an old favourite to potentially agree an official return to the grid. Red Bull Racing's top personnel have preached independence for months and made it clear there was opposition to Porsche just waltzing in on its own terms. Red Bull committed to creating its new powertrains division entirely independently of any prospective manufacturer partnership and has sunk massive investment into building a bespoke facility with the best equipment and personnel Red Bull could find. Its message through the process has been simple: Red Bull is open to partnering with an engine manufacturer, but only on its own terms. The word in the paddock for a while has been that Red Bull owner Dietrich Mateschitz opened the door to Porsche in a much more inviting way than Christian Horner and his colleagues in Milton Keynes. When it was leaked that Porsche was putting in place the necessary paperwork to green-light a 50% buy-in to Red Bull technology, which is effectively the Red Bull F1 operation, it was clear that negotiations were taking place on a level far grander than had initially been perceived. And there's no room for interpretation in Porsche's statement issued last week, as its official line is now that buying into Red Bull's team was on the table. So how did things get from that point, and the expectation within the F1 paddock that Red Bull and Porsche could announce a partnership as early as the Austrian Grand Prix at the start of July, to this complete collapse of negotiations? Something appears to have changed around July and August, and the suggestion is that the FIA's sluggish process in finalising the 2026 power unit rules had a part to play. FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem was pressured to be firm with the deadline, but let the process spill into mid-August. It seems that it was during this time that Red Bull really got cold feet, and questioned the sense of selling half the company to Porsche. Maybe it was because there was more time for Horner and Red Bull Motorsport advisor Helmut Marko to lobby Mateschitz. Maybe the heel dragging from Porsche while waiting for 100% settled technical regulations and the need to get sign-off from the Volkswagen Group board gave Red Bull a jolt, because it was a glimpse of the slow, board-influenced fate it would be embracing. Whatever the reason, either Mateschitz changed his mind or someone helped change it for him. And Horner's insistence that Red Bull Racing and Red Bull Powertrains remain in control of their destinies has won out. Red Bull decided it wasn't willing to sell anything, not Red Bull Racing itself, Red Bull Technology, or Red Bull Powertrains. The only deal on the table from Red Bull was an engine branding one. Porsche has refused that, so it's gone from believing that an equal partnership with Red Bull was on the cards to withdrawing from negotiations entirely. And what was looking for so long like a case of when this partnership would be confirmed, not if, is now up in smoke. Attracting new brands was at the centre of the revised F1 engine regulations for 2026 and various cost-cutting measures within the championship. F1 has now slipped from the brink of getting 2 VW Group brands to enter to having Audi publicly committed but without a team, and Porsche still interested but without, well, anything. Porsche was the first and most public news supporter of F1's new direction, and F1 will be keen for a Porsche entry to be salvaged. It's taking comfort from the final part of Porsche's statement. With the finalised rule changes, the racing series nevertheless remains an attractive environment for Porsche, which will continue to be monitored. So here's the key thing F1 will be asking itself: is there another way to get Porsche through the door? The answer is more complicated than the question. First, Porsche needs a route onto the grid. Buying into an existing team appears to be the only avenue, and F1 is a seller's market. A team will not come cheap, although Porsche was clearly willing to spend what would have been an eye-watering sum if it was to buy 50% of Red Bull technology. Williams might be the only serious option to buy into now. It's currently a lower midfield team and certainly a long-term project. But Williams boss Jost Capito knows the VW Group from his time in charge of the all-conquering World Rally Championship program, and there have been plenty of rumours in recent months about discussions taking place. Williams is also independent, and its owner, Dorilton Capital, bought the team as an investment. What better guaranteed way to make a handsome return on that than to sell to a manufacturer that's very keen on joining the grid but has few alternatives? There is another emerging theory too, which is that Porsche could potentially join forces with Andretti. The two companies have already struck a deal to work together in Formula E, and with Andretti setting out plans to enter a new team in 2024, this could be a great way for Porsche to get in on a project at the ground floor. Andretti has so far failed to endear itself to F1 and the existing teams because an 11th entry has been earmarked in simple terms for a big manufacturer. If Andretti applies as the Porsche Works team, that would fulfill every requirement that Andretti's critics have previously cast doubts over. Whatever team choice is available to Porsche, a common problem remains. What on earth does it do for an engine? There's a mid-October deadline to sign up for the 2026 power unit regulations and have a stake in discussions about future regulatory changes. Porsche could yet sign up to that and just withdraw further down the line if nothing comes to fruition. This would buy it some time to weigh up what looks like a limited set of options. Porsche is not believed to have the infrastructure that can be tooled up for a standalone engine project in the manner Audi is undertaking. That's why a Red Bull powertrains deal was so appealing, and Porsche didn't plan for an alternative, so work needed to start months ago on a proper in-house Porsche program like it did at Audi. Alternative options look slim. A Porsche branded team couldn't possibly run as a Porsche Ferrari or Porsche Mercedes, especially as they are massive rivals in the automotive world. It just sounds wrong. And there will only be one independent engine manufacturer in 2026, Red Bull Powertrains. The breakdown of the current discussions would presumably preclude a simple customer deal there. This brings us to the simplest solution: use the Audi engine and badge it as a Porsche. The engine would be prioritised for Audi's own car, so Porsche would have to work within certain design constraints, and that is a legitimate practicality concern. But there's another, potentially more significant problem. Despite Porsche and Audi both being part of the VW group, there is a serious rivalry between the two brands, and some high-profile figures in F1 are known to have reservations about whether they would be willing to share an engine. Porsche may resent the idea of relying on Audi technology, and Audi may not wish to hand over said technology to Porsche. This could take some board-level mediation from Volkswagen itself to force the two brands to play ball. A forced coalition could be a condition of the board supporting Audi's program, especially if elements of that financial undertaking still need to be signed off. For instance, Audi still hasn't bought Sauber, and without that, it doesn't have a team to use the engine it intends to build. The VW group clearly wants to be in F1, and maybe a solo Audi entry is enough. But VW was willing to have its two biggest brands enter completely independently of each other, so our gut feeling is that it still wants two bites at the cherry. Even if the desire is there though, this is a real headache for Porsche to solve. For Red Bull, the consequences are far less severe. That's why it was able to dictate terms and why Porsche's negotiating position was weak. The rationale behind creating Red Bull Powertrains was to give Red Bull full control of its own destiny. On paper, it has everything it needs, but it's a startup F1 engine manufacturer, and to produce a top-line power unit for the 2026 rules will still be a huge challenge. One thing Red Bull is open to exploring in detail now that negotiations with Porsche have formally ended is whether Honda could return as an official partner. Red Bull currently uses engines designed and assembled by Honda in the wake of the Japanese manufacturer's official withdrawal from F1 at the end of 2021, and will continue to use these engines until the end of the current rule cycle in 2025. While Red Bull Powertrains has been kitted out with high-tech equipment to ensure it produces a quality engine in 2026, its main achievement so far is producing a first V6 test engine on the dyno, with questions over whether it can handle the hybrid side, chiefly the MGU-K and battery itself as well. Horner insists that the company is in a position with the recruitment and the investment and the facility to do all of that. But he has indicated a willingness to collaborate with Honda if the manufacturer decides it wants to re-enter F1, particularly on the battery side. This is a strong hint that outsourcing the non-V6 part of the Red Bull power unit is something that the powertrains company needs to consider to some degree. This is no great surprise, as there are often silent partners and third-party suppliers involved in F1 engine projects. Honda would be a front-facing partner though, and it remains to be seen whether the type of arrangement Red Bull wants would be compatible with the Japanese manufacturer. For starters, Honda's energy recovery system work on the current turbo hybrid F1 engines was done in Milton Keynes, at a facility sold to Red Bull as part of the engine continuation project for 2022 and beyond. And Honda's expertise in Sakura lies predominantly on the internal combustion engine side, although it is increasing its hybridization as part of the company's carbon neutral technology push, so this could be a workable match. What a Red Bull-Honda partnership would mean for F1's new manufacturer regulations is unclear. It could affect whether Red Bull powertrains is eligible for extra dyno hours and higher spending limits, although a V6 designed and built by Red Bull would presumably satisfy the definition even if the ERS partner is an established F1 manufacturer. There's also the not so small matter that officially Honda is not considering a return to F1 in 2026, at least not at board level. But the company's racing division remains close to Red Bull because there is still an active partnership, and we understand there have been discussions about what could be possible in 2026 and beyond. Horner has emphasised that Red Bull Powertrains is not contingent or dependent on other potential partnerships, but admits we'd be stupid not to listen to any interested parties. That process has already started with Honda, although if we've learned anything from the Porsche debacle, it's that these talks could easily amount to nothing, however likely a positive outcome looks.